I was wondering, what advice would you give to vegetarians and vegans? And I think it's great that you're an ex-vegetarian. Plant-based is becoming a very strong movement in New Zealand. A lot of concern about animal welfare and the planet. What would you say to vegetarians and vegans?
Well, okay. I'd start off by saying, first of all, why are you vegetarian or vegan? If you are an ethical vegetarian or vegan, you really might want to do your research into the exact number of animals that die using monocropping versus ruminant agriculture, for example. So, and you might want to also research exactly what the effect on the environment is. For example, ruminants, if you're properly raising cows, right? Ruminants eat wild grasses, they eat cellulose. A massive percentage of the land surface on Earth is covered with wild grass. The cellulose has literally no other purpose. No other animal can eat it or do anything with it. Humans can't really do anything with it. So they're not competing with the human food supply when they're eating wild grasses. A cow that's being properly raised on wild grassland is literally powered just by ambient sunlight and rainfall. This is completely energy neutral. In fact, they're better than carbon neutral because they sequester carbon dioxide in the soil. Wild grasses sequester a lot of carbon dioxide in their root systems. And so a cow eating wild grasses on pasture is better than carbon neutral, using only ambient sunlight and rainfall. And it's absolutely amazing in terms of regenerative agriculture versus monocropping, where you're literally destroying the topsoil. So the problem with monocropping is we destroy the land, kill all the animals that live on it, use a lot of pesticides and fertilizer, which comes from fossil fuels, by the way, and then you're basically just slowly destroying the topsoil. When you have a ruminant eating wild grasses, you're building topsoil. You're literally leaving the soil better than when you found it, versus monocropping, where you just slowly destroy the topsoil. So to start off with, if you're ethically going plant-based to save the environment, you really, really need to do more research on regenerative agriculture and properly raised ruminants. If you're eating for health reasons, there's basically no compelling reason to eat a pure plant-based diet. I mean, even in the Adventist health studies, adding fish, for example, to a vegetarian diet improved outcomes for vegetarian Adventists. So I would encourage anyone who's vegetarian to just find the animal foods that you do eat, that you are willing to eat, and eat a lot of those, because this is going to be your best source of protein. This is going to be your most bioavailable protein. Animal foods always have higher protein and higher nutrient density than plant foods, and this is just due to biomagnification. So for example, a plant is limited as to how far its roots can reach, and so the amount of minerals in a plant is limited, and the amount of protein in a plant is limited based on nitrogen availability. But a cow or an animal can walk around and eat thousands of plants, and they will bioaccumulate or biomagnify the minerals and the protein. So you get a much higher nitrogen to carbon ratio in an animal food and a much higher nutrient density, both protein and minerals, because it's higher on the food chain. That's just the way it works. So if you're a vegetarian, you want to find the few animal foods you're willing to eat and just eat the heck out of them. And then you want to make sure they're properly raised. Pastured eggs, pastured dairy, for example. For vegans, I highly recommend supplementation with protein. You want to go out of your way to eat some sort of protein supplement. Tofu is technically a protein supplement. Any kind of soybean product is a protein supplement. Wheat gluten is a protein supplement. You're basically looking for protein supplementation. It could be rice or pea or hemp or lentil or legume or soy or tofu or any kind of textured vegetable protein, but you're trying to increase the protein in your diet any way you can. I don't think that's optimal because the amount of energy it takes to process plant proteins is quite bad for the environment in the big picture. If you look at the energy, if you look at the lifetime cycle analysis of energy requirements to make like tofu, for example, versus just a cow, one cow will feed one human for an entire year with like 500 pounds of usable meat. And you're only killing a single animal, and it's powered by sunlight and rainfall. But if you look at what it takes to monocrop a whole field of soybeans and how many animals you kill and how many nitrogen fertilizer products you have to use and pesticides, and then if you look at the processing and all the energy intensive processes it takes in the full life cycle to make your tofu, it's actually much, much higher than ruminant agriculture. It's much, much worse for the environment. You're actually not doing anybody any favors. But still, if you insist on being vegan because you love animals so much, and you're not going to be convinced otherwise, I do recommend going way out of your way to prioritize protein and get as much protein into your diet as you can.
And so would you be talking about sort of processed protein then? So sort of like soy protein replacement rather than, trying to eat soy itself. Is that what you're recommending? Or, hemp protein powder or something like that?
Yes, it could be both. So you could go out of your way to eat soybeans in any form, edamame, tofu, but you might also need a protein supplement like a hemp powder or a rice powder or a pea powder or a soybean powder. And I do have vegans who are very healthy, but most of them are supplementing with protein.
And what about things like B12 and other, micronutrients?
Right. So the micronutrients you're going to be low on a vegan diet is definitely B12, D, iron, and DHA, EPA, your essential fatty acids that you would normally get from, say, fish, for example. So you want to take some sort of algae-based essential fatty acid product. You want to take B12 for sure. You want to supplement with vitamin D. You want to supplement with iron. If you take all these supplements and if you supplement protein, you can be totally healthy on a plant-based diet. Unfortunately, it's way more difficult, way more complicated, and you don't really have any health benefits there, and you haven't really helped the planet because the energy-intensive processes that are required to refine all that crap is really astronomical compared to regenerative animal practices.
So this is a lot of the disinformation we've been fed, isn't it? Alternative.
Oh yeah, I was a vegetarian for 20 years, so believe me, I know all about both sides, and it's a lot of misinformation out there, and I used to believe it too. I mean, I just didn't know any better. I hadn't really researched it, and I just believed what everyone told me.